Hi, I'm Thomas from Meaningful Gigs, and welcome back to another episode of Heroes of the Creative Revolution. In this episode, we sit down for a conversation with Rachel Posman of Salesforce as she impacts her wisdom on implementing and running design ops. She talks about starting design ops with one person, how to lead larger teams, splitting up design ops functions, and much, much more. Let's dive in.
Yeah, welcome, Rachel. It's super nice to have you here. Thanks for joining us. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. Excited to chat.
Awesome. So just want to learn a little bit about you. I know you have a interesting career and done a lot of cool things. So, if you want to give kind of our audience some highlights, that would be wonderful.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Rachel, as you just said. I'm in San Francisco. I am currently a senior director of design operations at Salesforce, and I lead our central design operations team. So this is like a horizontal team that supports our global UX org with things like community and culture building, scale and enablement, learning and growth for our designers. And I think like probably most of us or many of us in these kinds of roles, I took like a non-traditional career path to get here. So I actually started as a professional ballet dancer, started dancing at 5 and danced professionally up through mid-20s when I decided to go get like I call it a real paying job, but so I went back to school, went to business school at Berkeley, and then I was like trying to find roles in out there that kind of combined my love for the arts and creativity with this like business operational mind that I have too. And so I ended up finding design opsy types roles. It wasn't called that back then. This was a long time ago now. So they were like program management roles in design agencies and things like that. So that's where I started. Ended up going back to school, got an MBA in design strategy. So this was an MBA at a design school, which was again me finding like ways to merge these two passions. And then from there, I ended up going to Adaptive Path, which was an experience in UX agency that was like leading the way in this space at the time. Joined their design ops team. Back then it was called design management, that we were kind of standing up from the ground on Kristen Skinner's team there, and worked there, and they got acquired by Capital One and stayed there for quite a while. And then I moved over to Uber Eats, where I stood up the design team from the ground up on the Eats side. And then Salesforce came knocking, and I took a role to help them stand up this central ops practice. So they had a really great operations team, but all the DPMs, design program managers, were like getting pulled in all these directions. So they were looking for ways to help clarify like roles on the design ops team. And so I came in to help do that for this horizontal function. So that's my long story shortened.
You said you're in ballet. That's awesome. Love ballet. I'm curious if there was like one thing that you learned in ballet that you still kind of use today, if there is any. What would that be?
Yeah, I think like I started at 5. So like this was my full life, my full world, my whole life. And I remember growing up, the ballet studio I was at had like in giant letters in the room on the wall, concentration. Like that was like the thing that we were like ingrained into us. And like the idea that like there's always room for improvement. Like you're doing the same thing every single day of your life in ballet. Like you take the same class, you do the same steps, but you're never quite doing it perfectly. Like that's the goal, right? Perfection, but it's never going to happen. So you're just trying and trying. So I think that's what I apply into like work too. It's like you always ways to improve. There's always new ways to approach things. And like, there's always like creativity or artistry that can be added in different ways. So I think that still is part of my approach.
Just being in this role, for people listening, like tell us a little bit about how you've, implemented design ops and how the orgs have benefited from it.
So I think like in design, when designers are like truly invested in and passionate about the creative process, the design process, they're more likely to create products and services that are like not only beautiful and useful, but they can connect with users on a deeper level. And I think also when they're enjoying the process of creating, it really shows in the product. So I think that's where design ops comes in. And so for me, design ops is, we are service experience systems designers, but we are designing internal processes and systems and experiences for designers and design teams. And I think the ultimate goal and like impact and value of design ops is that we're creating better experiences, not just for our end users, but our work does do that, but also for the designers themselves. And so I often describe it as like we are focusing on the how of design, and designers are focusing on the what. And I think also like the intermediaries between different businesses and product functions that help designers, like I mentioned earlier, like focus on what they do best, which is designers. So that's the designer side. But I think there's also a lot of value for what we do for leaders. And I think it comes from like this ability to gain a deep understanding of like the needs of the design organization, how things work, the flows, like how we work with other teams. And so our insights and like the advocacy we have for designers and really our thought partnership is highly valuable to our design leaders.
Yeah. Okay. So that makes sense. So it sounds like, there's a lot of focus, like you're doing the how, they do the what, and that's the superpower. And if they really are able to do that, they find more meaning in their work and they're more productive. And I just talked at the Henry Stewart Design Ops conference, and one of the things that I talked about was if you, as design ops leaders, kind of enable creatives to focus on what they're really good at, there'll be less burnout. And they'll be more creative and they'll find more meaning, which means more productivity, right? What do you think? I think the challenge with most organizations is like, how do you like measure success?
This is funny because I just hosted a panel on this topic yesterday, and I think this is like a question that comes up a lot, but there really is no single answer, I think, for how design ops can measure success, because I think the needs of every design org are different, and the priorities of different leaders are different. So like, one leader might be compelled by numbers, another one might be compelled by stories, and like how you collect information or what you're sharing with the org as far as sharing back metrics or measurements or showing success, showing impact, I think can vary so much. And I also think like in design operations, we're seeing two different kind of flavors of design ops emerge. And within each of those, there's different things that you're measuring. So my colleague, John Calhoun, and I shared an article a few years ago about how our teams are starting to create two separate focus areas for design ops. So one, his team is what we call product design ops. And they are like deeply embedded with design teams, like focusing on delivery and the product delivery life cycle. So you can imagine like the metrics or things that they might be sharing or looking at are delivery based, or even broadly more about like product goals or design goals. My team, like I mentioned, is a horizontal, and we're about kind of scaling design ops, supporting people with programs like, org-wide events or learning and growth programs to help upskill our designers, or onboarding. So like metrics and measures in those spaces are different. They're about engagement and retention and, like open rates for communications, like that kind of stuff. But I think really like whatever the metric is, like it's all about like showing value. So you're making an impact, you're solving problems. I think having a point of view and really ultimately like making it easier for design teams to do their work. So not easily measured, all of this stuff. And I think even like not all the measures, all the things you can measure don't necessarily even matter. But I think it's really about the impact that you're making, and that's being felt by the team.
But I'm curious about something you said regarding kind of breaking up the functions to like delivery and yeah, can you go into that again?
Yeah,
some color.
So I think and this is more like on larger design ops teams or design ops teams that support big design orgs. So, you might not be seeing this on a small design ops team that doesn't have that capacity. But what we were finding was we had design ops, just a big pool of design ops design program managers, and they were being pulled in all these directions. So they would be deep in helping their design leaders, and then we're like, oh, we need a new onboarding program. And then they're like, okay, pull back out to create something for the whole org. Okay, back deep into the design org and pull back and to do, an event or something. And that just caused a lot of friction, both for the design leaders who were like, wait, where are you going? I thought you're helping my team. Now you're having to take time away. And, at Salesforce, it could be for a Dreamforce or something like that. That is time intensive. And so we were realizing that we needed to create more focus. So like I said, one focused on delivery, and those folks, those DPMs are really aligned to those, our products, our clouds. And then my team is the horizontal, and we're surfacing prioritized and strategic programs for our whole org. And we're seeing this across industry now too, that that's kind of what some folks are doing.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. That helps clarify. And when you say small teams versus large, what's small versus large in your book?
I mean, I've worked on, I've been the only design program manager on a design team. And so you're being pulled in multiple directions, or even maybe there's 3 and, you don't really you have to prioritize in different ways. So maybe you're only doing that kind of horizontal stuff. You're not going deep with design teams. So it's small and large. There's different ways you can look at that, but I think, for example, our design team is 400 people. We have a decent size design ops team, and so we need to keep up with the scale of that.
Wow, 400. So that's a lot. So how many design ops folks do you have managing?
Well, it's changed in the last year, right, with reorgs, layoffs, and things. So not enough. It's never enough, but I think we might be around, I would call us on the mid to small size still, maybe, I don't know, 12. But we were bigger last year.
Yeah, changes in the industry that happens. It's, we're resilient. We'll overcome. So yeah, where does one even start for people that are thinking about starting up their own small design ops team and making sure that it aligns with the business goals? What kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about when I joined Uber Eats. So that was one of the places I joined where I was the first and only design ops person on the team. So I joined, and the team that I joined had not worked with design ops before. So we were kind of separate from Uber. So there's Uber, they had a design ops org and functioned, and they were growing and pretty solid. And then Uber Eats, though, didn't. So I was the first one to join that team, and we operated very separately at that time. And so I think there were a lot of things that were happening at that time that I needed to figure out what the priorities were. And I think being the first person in any role is overwhelming, but as an ops person, it can sometimes feel like extra pressure, right? You have to, maybe you're showing the value of the role to folks who haven't worked with design ops before, but I think there's also this people might see you as the fixer, like, oh, great, you're going to come in and solve all our problems. You're the ops person, like, all the things that are like annoying to us about the way we work, like you're going to come in and fix that all. So I think like that's another thing that we have to look out for when joining a new team, is really clarifying like what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. And I think, like I said before, if you are the first one, that means there's other people who have unofficially been doing that role. So there's you might be learning from and taking guidance from them, because that work needs to be done. And so when I started there, I did a few things. I first took stock. I tried to figure out okay, who am I working with? What's going on here? So I spent my first month doing one-on-ones with the entire design team. So our design leadership, designers, UX writers, researchers, and then even partners, so product and key partners. And I was really wanting to know what was working, what wasn't working, what are some pain points, and maybe even bright spots to help me with some quick wins and to gain trust. And I think that by doing that, that really helped to gain buy-in and confidence from my team. Because I was showing that I was understanding their context and values, and I wasn't just coming and repurposing old previous companies' solutions. I was trying to understand their context. So then I got all this information and I synthesized it and I was prioritizing it. And I think that not only did that help me figure out what I was going to do, but it helped validate for the team. And also created a shared understanding of what's the current state of design, which might not have been clear or evident. So that was super helpful for the design leaders too. And then I just prioritized each thing with the help of designers. So P0 to P2, what are the initiatives I'm gonna do? And I only focused on the P0s, and I said not yet to the rest, to the P1s and 2s, and also all the things that came my way, which there's always things that come your way in ops. And I think that's super helpful, because if you don't do that, then operations can be seen as everything. Everything can fall on your plate, everything from hey, help us design our creative space, to help us design our strategy. The spectrum is so wide for ops that it's really important to narrow in and define your scope. So are you going to be deep with a design team? In my case, I wasn't. I was zoomed out across the whole org. So I think it's really important to define that with your leaders. And then I think last bit here is where do you start? I think foundational design focused stuff is a good place to start. So there's always going to be lots of things to do with connecting the dots across other teams, product and maybe even other design teams. But I think it's really important to create a strong foundation for your own design team, so that can help also create clarity around what you're not doing, because focusing just on design is important. So that's what I did. Created a bunch of foundational programs to start, quick wins, gain trust. And I might not have been able to narrow in on the things I did narrow in on without that discovery work and having those conversations and doing the research that I did before.
Great, I love that. So yeah, it's 3 core things. You went in, you spend time essentially building trust and learning as much as you can, right? So you knew the stakeholders, you knew what was important, what was there before you got there. And then the second thing you did was basically, again, after learning, prioritization, right?
Buzzing all the themes and groups, and then went through the prioritization process.
Yeah, because ultimately people just throw stuff on your plate, and you had to know, okay, I've learned this, here's the most important thing, P0, that's what I'm going to focus on. And then from that, you're able to just hone in on the design and just make sure it's executed at a high level.
Yeah.
Great. In that, what was what do you think is the biggest challenge, right? I think a lot of people go in and have a plan. And like Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. Well, what was the biggest challenge in doing those things?
I think it's always the amount that can be done and that you want to do. Like, I think in ops, you're seeing like, and you might want to be the fixer. Like, you're seeing so much opportunity, and so it's kind of easy to just like say yes to things just because you're interested in them and not, and even though they might not be like the highest priority. So for me, it's always really hard to say no. Like, I'll be like, that will just take, me an hour. But really, like, if it's not a priority, like it's important to keep those boundaries. And I think like another challenge is just like folks that don't quite understand design ops. But it's always great to have like find a champion who is in design, who does get it, and who can like, sing your praises and amplify your stuff and share in their words like why it's important. So I always try to do that too. Have others communicate the value that we're providing.
Yeah, so saying no to things, and that's usually hard, but it's super important. So saying no and then finding an internal champion that can push ideas with you.
Yeah, exactly.
Love that. If you were to look back, you're just starting out your career. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think like to sum it up is just to make the invisible visible. And what I mean by that is, I think it was Jared Spool who said, good design is done well. When done well, becomes invisible. It's only when it's done poorly that we notice. And I think that is completely true for design operations. Like, when it's done right, you don't even notice it, like a lot of it. It's just like so ingrained in the way design teams work that it's like kind of feels like no other way would make sense. It's only like when breakdowns are happening or things that aren't working that you might get pointed at. So I think like this is a problem because it can lead to a lack of value or understanding of our work, or it could even eventually lead to like career limitations and stuff when you're not being recognized for the amount of work and the impact you're making. So that's something that like I would tell myself is like, it took me a while to figure out is that like part of the work of design ops is to share what you're doing, like open the hood and show the engine every once in a while, because I assumed like everyone knows like how much work it took to get here, but that's not the truth. And I think it's important for yourself and for your team to like be recognized. And so I think I would say like share more, like share how you did it, what you did to get there. Like, I don't think a lot of, designers might realize that we use the design process to make decisions, that we're using design thinking. And so by me sharing that, like, hey, I know your language, I do the same thing as you, but I'm doing it for internal teams, like that creates a lot of buy-in and also just like trust and credibility. So I would say do that early. Don't make assumptions.
That's great. That's a good piece of advice, I think, for most careers. For anybody starting out, it's that people don't know the amount of work that you've put in, and if you can't make the invisible visible, which I love that quote, nobody would know the impact. And so it's important to at least be clear about that, and it builds trust. So yeah, Rachel, I hear you have a book coming out. You want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so we are in the middle of writing, so it's still a ways out, but I am co-writing a book on design operations with my colleague John Calhoun with Rosenfeld Media. So you can head to Rosenfeld Media and look for The Design Conductors, Your Essential Guide to Design Operations. So looking at summer 2024, we are deep in writing, but yeah, it's fun stuff.
Great. If you If you want a book, they'll give you some key insights. Go put it on your list, put it on your calendar, and when it's out, go get it. Thanks, Rachel. All right.